Ahoy mateys, I hope you're all ready to set sail on a fantastic voyage. That's right, Soberoni of G&A Reviews here, with a servant spotlight for the Sailor Shota of the Seven Seas, Nemo. We'll be examining his stats and skills, as well as going over pointers at how to utilize him effectively, and an overall grade comparing him to how he stacks up to the other 5-star servants. So if you're as excited as Musashi to dive into this little lad, then make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and ring my bell so you can catch all of these spotlight videos as they go up, and you can help out the channel. And now, on to Nemo stats. Nemo has a max HP of 13,680 and a max attack of 11,427. His HP is well above average for his class, however his attack is on the lower end. Compared to the rest of the SSR servants, both Nemo's attack and HP are about average, and when it comes to his command cards, Nemo has 3 hits on his quick card, 4 hits on his arts card, 3 hits on his buster, and 4 hits on his extra. He has an NP gain rate of 0.59% and a star rate of 8.9%. Despite his low NP gain rate, Nemo does have excellent NP gain due to his high hit counts, and his star generating is also pretty good. Nemo has a good all-arounder stat spread with an even distribution between offense and defense, and no glaring statistical weaknesses. Taking a look at his skills, Nemo's first skill is Voyager of the Storm, rank C++. This skill increases the party's NP damage and attack damage for 1 turn, both between 6 and 12%, and it will further increase the party's attack damage for 3 turns between 10 and 20% when used on a waterside or void space battlefield, all of these effects depending on level. His second skill is Indomitable, rank B+. This grants Nemo Guts 1 time, lasting for 5 turns, and reviving him with between 2,000 and 3,000 HP. It also charges his own NP gauge between 20 and 30%, and if his Guts is activated, he will gain between 30 and 50% NP charge, all depending on level. And finally, his last skill is Journey's Guidance, rank C++. This skill increases the party's arts card effectiveness for 3 turns between 10 and 20%. It also generates between 5 and 15 crit stars, and when used on a waterside or void space battlefield, it will further increase the party's arts card effectiveness by another 10 to 20% for 3 turns, all depending on level. As for his passives, Nemo has Riding rank A+, which increases his quick card effectiveness by 11%, Divinity rank A, which increases his damage by 200, and Sea God's Protection rank B, which increases the critical damage on his arts cards by 10%, and it reduces the damage he takes by 500 when he's on a waterside battlefield or void space. Moving on to his deck and Noble Phantasm, Nemo has an Arts Buster deck with Quick, Arts Buster Buster, and an Arts Noble Phantasm. His Noble Phantasm is Great Ram Nautilus. It's a single target arts attack that deals damage to 1 enemy with between a 900 and 1500% damage modifier depending on level. It also deals an additional 150% extra damage to super large enemies, and when used on a void space or waterside battlefield, it also gains Ignore Evasion and a 20% buff to NP damage. This Noble Phantasm also increases Nemo's NP damage for 1 turn between 10 and 30% depending on overcharge. Thankfully, Nemo doesn't require any bronze mats for his ascensions. However, he does require a ton of newer materials, so I hope you've been farming those lost belts. For ascension, he's going to need 8 Eternal Gears, 10 Seashells, 15 Aurora Steel, and 12 Spiritrons. Eternal Gears are farmable at the Barrel Tower in Shinjuku with a 47% drop rate. Seashells drop at the Observatory in Babylonia with a 46% drop rate. Aurora Steel are best farmed at the Castle of Snow and Ice in Lost Belt 2 with a 47% drop rate. And Spiritrons have a 45% drop rate at the underground structure in Olympus. For his skills, Nemo's going to need 15 Seashells, 15 Ancient Gears, 15 Reactor Cores, and 24 Spiritrons per skill. Reactor Cores have a 22% drop rate at the West Interstellar City in Olympus. I have said this before in previous spotlights, but one of my favorite things about FGO is how they incorporate a servant's lore into their gameplay. Stuff like Summer BB's card freezing or Van Gogh's curse buffs not only serve as powerful and fun gameplay mechanics, but they also do a great job of making the characters feel more unique and immersive. It feels like, wow, I'm really using this servant in a Grail War. And I'm proud to say that Nemo is definitely a servant whose lore is heavily reflected in his gameplay, for better and for worse. But let's start with the positives first. Nemo has a very strong stat spread. He doesn't have exceptionally high attack or HP, but they aren't low either. And he makes up for it with great NP gain on his arts cards and decent star generating. He also has some solid passives with Riding rank A+, that further helps with his star generating, and Sea God's Protection to give him a little extra oomph on his arts cards. As a rider, Nemo has very high star weight, so he does get good mileage out of this passive. massive. Unfortunately for Nemo though, the seas do start to get a little bit rocky when it comes to his skills. His first skill, Voyager of the Storm, is a party-wide damage buff that increases the attack and NP damage of all allies by a small amount. And when I say a small amount, I do mean very small. 12% is on the low end for buffs. And even if the NP damage and attack buffs do stack multiplicatively, that only adds up to a little bit over 25% additional damage, and that's just for one turn, so it really isn't that much. If you happen to be on a waterside or void space battlefield though, this buff becomes much better, adding an additional 20% to all allies for 3 turns. That basically turns this buff from an abysmal damage buff into a party-wide mana burst, which is very strong. And this is going to be a common theme with Nemo. Very true to his lore, he is much stronger on water than he is on land. Nearly all of his skills gain massive buffs on waterside battlefields. This also holds true for his third skill, Journey's Guidance. By default, it grants the party a 20% buff to arts card effectiveness and 15 crit stars. But on waterside battlefields, that arts buff jumps to 40%. This is another semi-support party-wide buff from Nemo, but this one works a little bit better than his first skill. 20% arts up for the party isn't bad, and it does help generate a lot of NP gain in arts teams. Plus, it has a very high 3-turn uptime, so even outside of water battlefields, this skill is still fairly useful. The Star Bomb, while small, does work well with Nemo due to his class. As a rider, his high star weight will ensure that he crits with the stars that he generates more often than not. So on the whole, this isn't a bad skill, but as is the running theme with Nemo, this skill is absolutely broken on a waterside battlefield. 40% arts up for 3 turns for the whole party is huge, and it can single-handedly fuel looping on some teams. But thankfully, Nemo does have one skill that isn't affected by the battlefield, Indomitable. Indomitable is a guts that comes with a 30% NP charge attached, and if the guts triggers, then Nemo gains an additional 50% NP charge. The guts effect does have good coverage, lasting for a full 5 turns, and once in a while that 50% NP charge can be a useful gimmick if you can trigger the guts. But most of the time the skill is just useful as a pure NP battery. 30% NP charge is just very good, especially when combined with mana loading and Nemo's naturally high NP gain, and it makes Nemo capable of a turn 1 NP on many team comps for immediate damage. As always, you should level the NP charge skill first, followed by his arts buff for better NP gain, and then the charisma last. For his append skills, mana loading is really the only worthwhile skill to take, since Nemo does most of his damage through his Noble Phantasm. Speaking of which, Nemo's NP is a single target arts attack that deals bonus damage against large enemies, and has a small buff attached. And just like his skills, Nemo's NP becomes much stronger on waterside battlefields. It gains Ignore Evasion and an additional 20% buff to NP damage. Nemo is a tale of two servants. There's Waterside Nemo, and then there's Standard Nemo. Waterside Nemo is an absolute beast. When he's used on waterside battlefields or void space, Nemo has the hardest hitting Noble Phantasm of all Rider servants, beating out even Ozzy, just due to the sheer amount of bonus buffs and damage that he has in his kit. He also has some of the best party-wide buffs of any semi-support, a consistent 40% arts up, and an NP mana burst, plus a charisma for the whole party, so that's a ton of additional DPS. Nemo's also capable of holding his own in challenge quests thanks to his evasion pierce and his high uptime guts for survivability. But that's Waterside Nemo. Standard Nemo, aka the Nemo that you're going to have for 95% of the game, is unfortunately very much inferior. Without the waterside buffs, Nemo's Noble Phantasm is far weaker, and it pales in comparison to the other SSR and even many SR Rider counterparts. His buffs also become very lackluster and underwhelming, to the point where their effect on the party is minimal at best, and even many silver and bronze supports will offer better buffing to the team. Standard Nemo's damage falls off hard as well, and he no longer has the evasion pierce on his Noble Phantasm, which makes him a little bit less viable for boss fights. Honestly, Nemo's greatest weakness is his inability to set up a water or void space battlefield on his own, because the difference is night and day. On a waterside battlefield, Nemo is arguably a top 3 servant in his class. Outside of it, he's more comparable to a mid-tier 4-star servant than any of the other SSR riders. Such is the massive nerf that he gets outside of his gimmick. Nemo also suffers from another issue, whether he's on a waterside battlefield or not, and that's that his NP refund isn't very good. Despite having great NP gain on his arts cards, his NP itself has very low hit counts, so he needs to depend on his face cards for NP gain, which can make looping with him a little trickier and more inconsistent than it may first appear. For those of you taking shots every time I say waterside battlefield, tell your livers to hang on just a little bit longer, because when it comes to team comps, naturally, the best supports for Nemo are ones who can set up a waterside battlefield, namely Summer Melt. Outside of changing the battlefield though, Chengang and Tamamo are also excellent supports for Nemo. Summer Melt can change the battlefield to waterside, so she enables Nemo to reach his full potential on any stage. Melt also benefits tremendously from Nemo's buffs, especially his arts buff, to further enable her looping. Gong can set up some niche farming strategies for Nemo by triggering his gut and granting him that 50% NP charge effect, and art supports with a strong buff and NP charge, or healing like Tamamo, can really help him excel in difficult content. I normally don't mention unreleased servants, but in the future we will also be getting a dedicated battlefield changing support in Zhang Jue. He can essentially transform the battlefield into anything, and he buffs arts cards and crit damage, so he's an ideal support for Nemo. Plus he's a 3-star, so he's fairly easy to obtain. Nemo's Bond CE is on the mysterious Wandering Island. It increases the party's damage against super large enemies by 15%, and their arts card effectiveness by 10% if Nemo's on a waterside battlefield. This isn't a CE worth using. Not only does it have the field requirement, but the first effect is incredibly niche too. Instead, give Nemo CEs that boost his arts card effectiveness and NP damage, like Sign of a Smiling Face, Formal Craft, Royal Icing, or Black Grail. In the future, Ocean Flyer works as a better version of Dive to Blue that also gives full attack stats, so that's worth picking up for Nemo as well. As for his command codes, I would recommend using a code that increases Star Absorb on his arts cards, like Gentle Wish, just to make getting arts crits that much easier for building up NP gauge. Overall, Nemo can best be described as a potentially great servant that is held back tremendously by his own gimmick and design. He absolutely excels on waterside battlefields and void space, and he can even be considered top of his class under the right conditions. But those conditions are hard to set up, and they're just very rare. Outside of the occasional summer event and some select story chapters, we don't really see waterside battlefields a whole lot. And that unfortunately renders Nemo subpar at best, as many of the welfare riders and top tier SR servants will just far outperform him outside of his optimal field. So Nemo gets a C+ from me. Nemo is just so dreadfully underpowered outside of his niche, and waterside battlefields don't make up enough of the game to justify having an entire servant built around that gimmick, no matter how flavorful and lore accurate it is. Thankfully though, all Nemo needs is one very obvious buff, and he will instantly be much stronger. You know what to do, Lasangle. And those are my thoughts on Nemo. Sorry to all you Nemo fans out there, but on the bright side, given my track record with these spotlights, Lasangle will probably buff him as soon as this video goes up. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and consider subscribing if you really enjoyed the video. Join the party over in our Discord, chill with us on Twitch, and follow us on Twitter, all linked in the description down below, and I'll see you all in the next Servant Spotlight. Soberoni out. Later.